Update. My 35 male mother's 58 female new fiance 24 male wants me to call him dad. How do I navigate this? Original post. Please buckle in because this is also weird. I'm a 35-year-old man, and for some backstory, my dad died when I was 19, leaving my mom with me and my two siblings. I'm the oldest. It took some time, but eventually my mom started dating again. We don't live together per se, but our houses back onto each other and have a gate. So it's pretty common for her to offer to do my laundry, for me to go over for dinner or to look after our dog, stuff like that. My siblings and I also go over there for dinner every other Friday night or so. A bit after she started dating, the men she was dating started getting younger and younger. I've never had a problem with this. She's been very open with me and my siblings that she wants to get married again, and we've always been supportive, at least after the initial shocks, lol. The latest guy is by far the most serious, and they've been dating since around last June. He proposed at the start of autumn and they wanted to get married next summer. Again, my siblings and I are fine with this because it's her life, and we trust him. He's a nice guy and they clearly love each other. Anyway, this weekend her fiance, let's call him Phil, called me and asked if I could come over. I said, yeah, sure, I'll be over after work, assuming he needed help with some DIY stuff they're doing. When I got there, he called me Sport and said we needed to talk. I should mention that Phil does this thing where he calls me and my younger brother things like kid, sport, scout, little buddy, or my personal favorite, red and blue, seemingly out of nowhere. My brother is 30 by the way. He tried it with my little sister 28 once and called her princess, but she just stared at him, and he stopped. The thing with Phil is that he reminds me a lot of Charlie Day's character in Horrible Bosses, and that his whole ambition has always been to meet a girl, get married, and have a family. When he told me and my brother this, my brother joked that our mom might come short on the last part. Phil got very upset, but they made up after. Anyway, I asked if my mom was around, and he said no. It was just him, and that we really need to talk man to man. I said sure, and he started talking about how he's always wanted to be a father and raise a son to call his own. Then he dropped this bombshell. Now, I know I can never replace your father, the man who made you, but it would mean the world to me if you could call me dad. I'll admit it, I sniggered a little. Then I realized he was serious because he looked like he was about to cry. He didn't drop it either. I asked if he really meant it, and he got emotional, talking about what it means to be a man and how his purpose is to have and provide for a family. He said he wants me and my siblings to be part of that family. He reiterated that he'll never replace my father, which rubbed me the wrong way, but he's ready to step up and be my dad and provide for and protect me and my siblings. I was just sitting there thinking, dude, I'm a decade older than you and live in a separate house. I don't need providing for. Even if I did, I don't think a guy a third my age who works part-time at the hardware store and collects manga is the man to do it. No offense to anyone into that. It's just, I don't know. I was a bit taken aback. I was in shock, so I just said, okay. He got emotional again, this time in a happy way, talking about how he wants to go camping or to a baseball game. I don't even like baseball, lol. He said he joined the Lions this year and wants to bring me into it as his boy. This all feels so surreal, especially because I'm 10 years older than this guy. I ended it by saying, this has gotten a bit too weird, and went home. He got very upset. I called my brother and he agreed it sounded weird AF. Later, my mom called me. She wasn't disappointed but admitted it had made Phil very upset and depressed. I told her that if he's embarrassed, he doesn't need to be. I get that he's excited about the marriage and we can laugh this off as a funny story. She said that wasn't what he was upset about. He, and she a little, is upset that he poured his heart out and I rejected him. She admitted it's a bit kooky but said this is how he proves to himself he's a man. I got a bit angry and said something like, first off, it's not my job to certify what's between his legs. This doesn't prove he's a man. It just proves he's a nut job. I apologized immediately, but she said she didn't want to hear it and hung up. She called me back 10 minutes later and we apologized. She begged me to just go along with it until he has some kids to call his own. She let slip that they plan to try IVF because she's not ready to give up on being a mom just yet. While I have my own thoughts about whether or not that's a good idea, I'm not here to litigate that. We finished the call fine. I reiterated that I'd support her, and she agreed it was definitely a stressful situation for me, but begged me to at least think about it. Which leads me to here. I've thought it over, and obviously I'm going to say no. I had a dad, and he died. Rest in peace, Dad. That's the only dad I've ever needed, wanted, or will ever bestow that title on. I'm not asking if someone is being unreasonable or what I should do. I'm more asking what I should say. This clearly means a lot to Phil for some reason, and I deeply love my mom, so I want to minimize the damage, especially since we're still so involved in each other's lives and they live right behind me. How can I make it clear to them, as painlessly as possible, that I think this is weird and borderline offensive? I really don't want to rip the band-aid off because I fear what it might do to the family. Edit showed my brother the post and he laughed so hard he started coughing. Lol. Then he said we should call Phil Dr. Phil and each other Blue and Red, swapping the nicknames he gave us around. Thoughts? Edit 2. As people were asking, he has no access to my mom's money or anything like that. She rents the house, which came pre-furnished and otherwise has no real assets. She doesn't make a lot of money anyway, so there's no pecuniary motive we can think of. Now for the top advice before reading the updates. I wonder if he grew up without a dad. He's giving a weird 1950s energy to this whole thing that feels like he only knows about dads from seeing them on TV. Oh no, his dad's still alive. Both his parents are. I've met them. They definitely feel odd about the whole situation, but go along with it for his sake. If it is so important to his personal identity to find a girl, have kids with her, and raise them as their dad, it seems like marrying a 58-year-old woman with adult children significantly older than himself is a pretty ineffective way to achieve those life goals. If it is so important to him, he should find someone his own age and make that happen the normal way. It's not your responsibility to make your mom's boy toy feel like a man. You're closer to being his much older brother than his son. Weird. This. Like, of course he feels like a child in this relationship and family. He's not going to feel like a man of the house in this situation. He's very unlikely to get his own child. So why is he sticking around? Me and my siblings all think he has issues talking to girls his own age. And so it led to this. You were downplaying your mother's behavior as well. If you'd cringe at the idea of a 58-year-old man dating a 24-year-old woman, you should be as disgusted by this situation. First update a week later. Anyway, I told both my siblings and we agreed we'd collectively put our foot down with Phil at our next family dinner next week, especially after an incident where Phil referred to my brother as sport and asked if he wanted to go see a baseball game with him. Admittedly, I was a bit spurred on by what you all said and got involved, pinging him back with, "Oh, no tickets from me, Daddy?" My brother responded with, "Daddy wants me all to himself." Hot. Phil took a few minutes to respond before saying he was shocked, speechless, and disgusted. He then messaged me privately to say he was utterly appalled and that he'd never disrespect his own father the way you boys did. At this point, I kind of lost it and said, "Right, and that's because you're not my father, Phil. You're a 24-year-old man-child dating my mother. You have no right to my respect, especially not to the respect a father gets." I immediately apologized, but then blocked his number and left the group chat. Apparently, he sent a similar message to my brother who responded with more daddy jokes, and Phil ended up blocking him. Well, that aside, I don't think the family dinner is going ahead. After the original post blew up, it seems someone from his Lions Club found it and reported it to their chair or whatever. Phil has either been expelled or resigned, or is it in the process of one of the two? He has removed nearly all mentions of the Lions from his social media. His last post about it was a cryptic goodbye where he drones on about what it means to be a man in the modern day and the duty of fatherhood bestowed on all men at birth. Really weird stuff. My mom called me half in a panic and half in a rage about the stuff I'd been telling about him, before breaking down and saying we needed to meet. So we did, and I got my brother to come over too. I know Phil has temporarily moved back in with his parents in the next town over, but from my understanding, they still want to go ahead with the wedding, though I think that's mostly because they've already spent money on it. When she said she was determined to have more kids, plural, my brother stepped up and asked if she really thought that was a good idea at her age. I pointed out that assuming she had a baby next year and lived to 80, the kid still wouldn't have finished college by the time she passed. She stammered on about how people live longer these days before breaking down crying and admitting she's not ready to give up on mothering due to some deep-seated trauma and fears about the family breaking apart, which I won't go into for her sake. When we reassured her that we weren't going anywhere, she calmed down. We had a very good, honest conversation where she agreed to drop the IVF idea on the grounds that it'd be too expensive and unlikely to get greenlit. She's still adamant that it's scientifically possible and ethically acceptable, because she has to win that argument. But whatever. Instead, she's agreed to look into fostering. My brother and I highly doubt anything will ever come of that, so we're not worried anymore. The very good news is that she's also agreed to look into therapy/psychiatric help to deal with her trauma. We helped her get in touch with a nice lady in town so she can unpack all this in a healthier way. At least one person is getting the help they need. I have no idea what's happened with Phil or what's going to happen with him, but I made it clear to my mom that he is not my dad. He's not even my stepdad, and I'm not a kid. He's never going to be either one outside of legal technicalities. She relented pretty quickly. I think she's finally broken out of her shell at least, and we've agreed that if things go ahead, that's going to be a huge red line. I don't know if Phil will want to be friends with me after all this. Lol. Anyway, thanks for the help on the original post, y'all. Wait, so Phil ran home to his mommy and daddy? Great job, kiddos. Great update. Thank you. Is this a message from inside a sitcom somewhere? This cannot be real. You say that, but about 10 years ago, my mother-in-law was obsessed with adopting a little boy, 5 to 7 years old, if I recall correctly. She made it very clear that my, then mid-30s, husband would be just like a full brother to this child, and our daughter would have another uncle. Her harebrained idea was so completely absurd that I literally laughed out loud when she proclaimed her adoption plans to me. She incredulously asked, "What's so funny?" I said, for one, the fact that she would be in her very late 70s when that child became a legal adult. For two, our daughter would never call a child her age or younger uncle anything. Don't worry, my mother-in-law has since moved on from that to countless other ridiculous notions. Sigh. I love how Phil's craziness escalated the already crazy situation of a 58-year-old dating a 24-year-old. So much so that it's not even a part of the discussion anymore. What I'm not understanding is why nobody is focused on that. Like, this is not normal. Is Phil legally an adult? Yes. Should he be treated like a kid? No, because he's not close to being a kid anymore. But that still doesn't make this age gap okay. Like 24 and almost 60? If the genders were reversed, a lot of people would say this isn't right. And it's not right regardless of what gender Phil is. There is absolutely no way Opie's mom isn't taking advantage of Phil. Sorry, Opie, but this is just plain gross of her. Nobody with decency would date a 24-year-old when they're 2 years away from being 60. It's not fair to the younger partner. The older partner is likely going to die decades before them, and OP's mom is at an age where it would be plain selfish to have and raise a baby when there's a possibility she could die in the next decade. Let's be real, it's not uncommon for people to die in their 70s, or even in their 60s. Is 60 super old? No, but it's more than middle-aged, and at that age, you're literally a senior. OP's mom clearly has a lot of trauma causing her to act out. None of this is normal. And the fact that Phil is trying to parent a man an entire decade older than him is really freaking weird. It indicates that he has issues too. And obviously some deep insecurities about dating an older woman who has kids older than him. Second update. A bit of an update as I can't respond to everybody, but I think the marriage is off. Phil has gone AWOL again and had a huge argument with his family after they demanded he call off the wedding and date people his own age. This apparently made him snap. My mom and I have met his mom and older brother, who said Phil is very insecure about girls his own age and has never been able to talk to them, hence his preference. This deeply upset my mom, and after some begging from all of us, she has agreed to push the wedding back, though she still wants to keep dating him. I have no idea where Phil is, though his brother assumes he's couch surfing with his D&D friends. These friends have been sending me and my brothers some not so nice messages, because apparently we're just jealous of the MILF hunter. If any of you socially inept fools are reading this, I don't need to chase middle-aged folks, because I can talk to people my own age like a normal person. Peace. Last story. My 30 female husband 30 male acts like an old man. What are my options? Hi everyone, I need some advice. My husband and I have been together for 6 years, married for 3. And while I love him dearly, I'm starting to feel like I'm married to a 70-year-old man in a 30-year-old's body. He's got this boomer energy that is fully leaning into, and I don't know how to handle it. For example, he makes these painfully unfunny dad jokes to everyone, like telling the postman, "Hope there's no bills today, haha." The postman didn't even fake a laugh. He just stared at him. It's excruciating to witness, but my husband is so proud of himself for these little zingers. And then there's his bedtime schedule. If we're out past 9 p.m., he gets cranky and complains about how late it is. I'm 30, I still want to have fun sometimes. But nope, he's always asking if we can go home early because it's getting late or traffic will be bad tomorrow. I've tried telling him that it's only going to get harder to make and maintain friends as we get older, and that we should sacrifice staying out a little later if it means building social bonds and relationships. But he just brushes it off. I don't want to spend my whole life eating dinner at 5 p.m. and being in bed by 9. Is there a way to talk to him about this without making him feel bad or defensive? I love him and want to include him in things. Now for the advice. This whole situation can be avoided by you not seemingly relying on your husband to have fun. Go out with friends. Leave him at home in bed. Just don't do anything stupid when you're out. That's your option. OP, maybe he has trouble sleeping. Not enough sleep or has sleep apnea, so is tired early and trying to get more sleep. Very valid point. I acted like a cranky old lady at 19 because I was severely sleep deprived. Unfortunately, lost a lot of friendships before I got treated. I've got a CPAP now and it has genuinely changed my life. Married people don't have to do everything together. If you want to stay up later, stay up later. Don't want to have dinner at 5? Don't. Does he have to be up early for work or the gym before work? Is this a major personality shift? Because people aren't projects. It's not for him to change. It's for you to adapt. If you want to bring it up to him, make it less, "You have boomer energy and are boring and make bad jokes." And more, "Hey, I know you like to go to bed early, but can we stay up later on Friday and Saturday nights and make one of those nights a date night and the other one more social?" Partially agree, apart from the "it's not for him to change, it's for you to adapt." They're spending their life together. Both should make an effort to reach a middle ground. That goes for everything. You can't expect one person to always adapt themselves for the other one. That won't work. Update. Am I the a-hole for exposing my wife's cheating and not wanting to do anything with a child that isn't mine? Original post. 2 weeks ago, I found out that my 5-year-old child isn't biologically mine. I felt deeply hurt and betrayed when I realized that my wife of 6 years, with whom I've been in a relationship for 9 years, cheated on me and got pregnant by another man. Without telling my wife, I decided to take a paternity test. When I got the results, I immediately confronted her. In my anger, I called her a whore and many other names. She started crying and explained that she hid the truth because she didn't want to break our happy family of 3. When I asked her why she cheated on me, she said it happened during a nasty argument we had years ago. She claimed it was just a one-time fling and that she's been loyal to me ever since. She admitted she had doubts about whether I was the father but never took a paternity test. She said she was happy seeing me happy and didn't want to have an abortion for the sake of our family. She also said she didn't tell me the truth to keep the peace. I told her I was divorcing and that I didn't want to be a part of our son's life. She started crying and begged me not to break our family apart. She insisted that I'm still his father and that I've been a wonderful father and husband. She asked me to forgive her and not let DNA destroy our lives. She continued begging, but I left immediately. Afterward, she began blowing up my phone with calls and messages. Initially, I decided not to tell anyone about what had happened, but I became so angry that I told everyone. Now, everyone is furious at my wife. Her parents have said they want nothing to do with her and have cut contact. My sister furiously called my soon-to-be ex and cursed her out. On the other hand, her brother and sister think I humiliated my wife and should have kept this between us instead of making it public. Yesterday, her sister called me and urged me to take my wife back and return to my son. I told her I don't have a son. She got angry, started cursing me, and said I'm a weak, pathetic man. She told me no wonder my wife cheated on me, and that I'm so insecure and weak that I had to go behind my wife's back to take a paternity test. She accused me of giving up on my son just because we don't share blood, and claimed that I'm the reason my wife is now alone and depressed. I hung up on her and instead called her husband to tell him everything. I even told him that her family's full of nut jobs and that maybe he should get a paternity test as well because he shouldn't trust them. He apologized on his wife's behalf and we ended a call. Now, I'm ignoring all calls from my wife and her sister. Now for the top comments before reading the update. Don't let DNA destroy our lives. Oh, it was the DNA that did the destruction. Damn, science. LMAO. Speaking of which, get an STD test. The cheater on the next update. Don't let an STD test destroy our lives. Damn crazy how DNAs just go around ruining marriages and destroying lives like that. Not the a-hole. Yep, those lying, cheating DNAs. The poor kid. Yeah, I really feel for the child here. At 5 years old, he has bonded with his father, who is now going to abandon him because of his mother's actions. That can mess a kid up for life. How do you explain to a 5-year-old why his daddy doesn't love him anymore? More importantly, how does Hopi just stop loving his 5-year-old? Now for the first update. I was absolutely shocked to see 10K comments on my post, and so many DMs when I checked it again yesterday. I'm thankful to everyone who reached out. I couldn't go through all the comments, but I took the time to read many of them. To those asking if I'm okay, I'm not, but I'll survive. Also, why are some people calling me misogynistic and saying I deserve to be cheated on? If your husband came to you and confessed to have a child outside of your marriage, wouldn't you curse him out? This isn't about gender at all. I decided to do the paternity test because my sister kept urging me to. She asked me multiple times, but I brushed it off. I never thought my wife would cheat on me, let alone get pregnant by another man. My sister is my best friend and has always looked out for me. She insisted I do the test because my son didn't look like me at all. I told her he looked like his mom, but she pushed me and I'm glad she did. She was heartbroken seeing me cry and angry at my wife. I must have hugged her for hours, crying, because I truly loved my son. But being around him reminded me of my wife's betrayal, which made the pain worse. After reading comments about how my son is a victim just like me, I decided not to cut him off completely right away, because it might mentally scar him. I called my wife and she picked up right away. I told her I was coming over to meet my son. She cried and said she was glad I was coming. I asked her if her sister was still there and she said she was. I told her to make sure her sister didn't speak to me or I'd punch her filthy mouth. She assured me her sister wouldn't interact with me. When my son saw me, he was very happy and hugged me instantly. He asked where I had been and I picked him up and I told him I had been working. I played with him for an hour and gently explained that I would be away frequently but would still visit and stay in touch. He didn't like the news, so to cheer him up, I told him I'd prepare a surprise for his birthday in December. I'm not sure what yet, but I'll figure it out. After we went outside to play, I talked to my wife. She immediately latched onto me, hugged me, and started crying. She begged me to come back to her and not give up on our family over a mistake. She said she had wanted to abort the pregnancy but didn't because I was happy. She insisted she had been loyal to me ever since. I got even angrier and grabbed her arm, yelling that she destroyed me and our son. I told her that when our son finds out the truth, he won't love her as much as he does now. I said, I came in you every single night. Where did it all go? But a random man comes in you once and you got pregnant? We both know I'm not infertile. I told her I wanted to tell everyone we know the truth. Her friends, the whole neighborhood, every single member of her family, even those living in China or people she hasn't spoken to in years. I even wanted to tell all her future partners. She started crying and shaking. I told her I wouldn't do it, not because of her, but because it would hurt the innocent child and ruin him. I said, don't misunderstand. I'm doing this for him, not for you. She said I was the love of her life and that she couldn't live without me. She vowed to wait until I calmed down and fight for me. She said she wouldn't let her family break apart over one mistake. She promised to give me as many children as I wanted, that she would get paternity tests for all of them, and started kissing me desperately. I pushed her away and said, you're delusional. You're acting like you've ruined my car or something. I would have forgiven you for anything else, but this is a betrayal to your husband and your own child. I yelled at her sister to get her professional help because she's losing it. Before she could say anything, I left because I wanted her to feel as miserable as possible. After I returned, I texted my wife saying I would visit frequently for my son, but that I'm only thinking about him, nothing else. I told her not to make things worse than they already are, to think about him and to be a good mother. I'm now living with my sister who has been fully supportive. She hugs me until I calm down, even if it takes hours. I'll start divorce proceedings soon. I know I'm his father, so I probably won't escape child support, and even if I do, I feel a moral obligation to be in his life. As for my wife and her sister, screw them both. They're both awful, and maybe it runs in their blood. For her, it's just a mistake. For you, it's years of lying. That's the part that really pisses me off. Calling the biggest betrayal just a mistake makes me think she's not contrite and just manipulating to get him back, versus really soaking in the gravity of how big her mistake ruined the lives of the two people she should love the most. Sorry you're going through this. One thing that bothered me about your post is that you said you're not cutting off your son right away. Decide if you're in or out on being a father and act accordingly. It will be worse for the child if you let him become more attached to you and then leave. If he's on the birth certificate, he can't just wash his hands off the child, even if it isn't his. Second update. It's been a month since I found out that my son isn't biologically mine. I've been seeking therapy and I've realized that I love my son deeply, even though he isn't biologically mine. I've always loved him and I always will. In my anger, I called my wife names, which I didn't intend to, but she betrayed me. As for my sister-in-law, she definitely deserved it, because she called me weak and treated me like crap after I found out the truth. After a lot of therapy sessions, I've come to realize that it's better to make peace with everyone and focusing on being in my child's life. I don't know why I keep getting angry messages accusing me of going too far, saying my situation is fake or insisting that I should forgive my wife. I agree that I was angry, but betrayal like this is far worse than just cheating. In any case, I'm posting again because I've truly tried my best. I talked things over with my sister-in-law. Thankfully, she wasn't hostile. We apologized to each other, and while we still don't like each other, we've made peace. I visit my home every few days. My sister-in-law, my wife, and my son still live in the house. I'm tolerating all of this because of my child. I just want a clean divorce from my wife. But I also want to stay in my child's life because I'm the only father he has ever known. Even though he's still young, I don't know how or when to tell him the truth. Every time I visit to spend time with my son, my wife always hugs me. I've stopped pushing her away because it never works. I just let her hug me and vent. She keeps apologizing and saying how sorry she is and how much she wants me back. I always tell her I'm only there for my son. She cries but thankfully doesn't say much in front of him. 3 days ago, when I visited my son, I absolutely adore him. He's always so excited whenever I come to see him. I told my wife that I've hired a lawyer, but only when my son wasn't around. My wife freaked out and begged me not to split our family apart. She said that while my son might not have my DNA, he is still my son and she is still my wife. She insisted that we could make things work. live happily, and that she would give me as many children as I wanted. I left after she vented. I'm still angry at my wife and sister-in-law, but I've been able to control my anger. Her family keeps calling me, telling me I should give my wife another chance and that she'll be a good wife to me. When I refused, they said there's a chance I might not be able to see my son. That scared me. I love my son deeply, even though he isn't mine biologically and he loves me as his father. But what if I'm not allowed to see him? What if they turn the situation against me? That's what I'm worried about. This isn't about me, it's about my child's mental health. I fear they're trying to weaponize the situation and I don't want that to happen. Am I being unfair to myself if I stay with my wife for my son's sake and help him? They're horrible people for using your son as a hostage to blackmail you into keeping their cheating daughter as your wife. You need to keep those texts and send them to your lawyer. Show them as proof that your wife is not fit to parent a child if she can use the child to blackmail you to do what she wants. My issue right now is not about getting back at my wife, my sister-in-law, or her family. I want to avoid fighting with them. I want them to realize that we can't keep fighting with each other, not for us, but for our son, their grandchild. I'm still angry, but I've decided to approach things peacefully and try to get along with them after my therapy sessions. That said, I hate every one of them, except my wife. I still love her, but I also hate her for her betrayal. I'm going above and beyond for my son. That's my priority. Putting my anger aside, my son doesn't deserve this much pain. He's so young, just 5 years old. I want a clean divorce and to co-parent, but my wife and her family are making everything so difficult for all of us. What kind of mother is she? She doesn't seem to care about our son, she just wants me back. Even if I decided to stay with her, our son would eventually realize that I'm not his biological father and that his parents hate each other. If he weren't so young, I would tell him the truth myself. But right now, there's no way to handle this without my wife agreeing to cooperate. I don't want conflict, but I also think it's unavoidable. I don't really know how to help my son in this situation. You have to fight for him, or you have to back away. This middle-of-the-road approach is how you end up trapped in a loveless marriage, as she's already willing to cheat and getting stepped on by your sister-in-law. Make your choice, but don't stay there with her family knowing that you are basically being forced into a situation like this, and your sister-in-law able to hold him against you. As much as it may hurt Opie, he should leave the kid for the kid's sake. I know people will jump at me for saying this, but this is the best option for Opie as well as the kid. Opie's soon-to-be ex-wife and her family will continue to use the kid as a pawn to drag Opie into staying into the relationship. And once Opie leaves, she will use the kid to hurt Opie. And in doing so, she will end up causing emotional damage to the kid. Opie may try to use her blackmailing to get custody, but considering Opie left the kid, they might use that against Opie to portray him as someone who might leave the kid in the future. Last story. Am I the a-hole for telling my husband's dad and dad's wife that I will not change our daughter's name because it hurts the wife's feelings? My husband, 29 male, has parents who divorced when he was 2. His dad remarried 2 years later to his wife, Sharon. Sharon and my late mother-in-law, who passed away when my husband was 8, were on very bad terms. Sharon has said that my mother-in-law made her life hell, wished her dead, laughed when she suffered 3 back-to-back miscarriages, tried to get CPS to take custody away from father-in-law and her, and attempted to remove her from the picture entirely using CPS. Sharon claims the only reason my husband never called her anything other than Sharon and always saw her as an outsider is because of mother-in-law. However, father-in-law's own siblings have said this is not accurate. They said Sharon and mother-in-law simply disliked each other. While they acknowledged that mother-in-law was dismissive of Sharon's role at times and didn't regard her as an equal in parenting, they said mother-in-law was nowhere near as bad as Sharon and father-in-law claim. When my mother-in-law passed away, my husband's relationship with father-in-law and Sharon deteriorated significantly. He forbade them from attending the funeral, saying that if they tried to come, he would run away until he was placed with other family members. My husband told me this himself. Father-in-law and Sharon said they were afraid he would lash out at them, and since Sharon was pregnant at a time, they gave in. They claim my husband hates them for not being there, but it says that them following through and staying away was one of the better decisions they made. He hates that he had to yell and threatened to run away to stop them from insisting on attending. By the time we met in college, he had very little contact with them. In recent years, there has been slightly more contact, but it's still minimal. He told me the whole story about how rocky their relationship was, and I knew he never planned to be very close to them. Sharon calls my husband her son. She even introduced herself to me as his mom and was shocked that I knew she wasn't. I haven't met her or father-in-law much. I know my husband's extended family far better as he's much closer to them than to father-in-law, Sharon, or his half-siblings. I recently gave birth to our daughter and we named her after my mother-in-law. My husband did not invite father-in-law or Sharon to meet our daughter, but they found out about her name via social media and reached out to him to ask why. A couple of days ago, they approached me at the mall and asked me to talk to them. They told me they had found out about her name and wanted to know why we would do that to Sharon, asking how I could be okay with using my daughter to hurt Sharon's feelings. They said I should insist on changing the name, maybe to something after Sharon, since she has been here all this time, but definitely not a name that would hurt her feelings so much. I told them I would not change my child's name, just because it hurts Sharon's feelings. That's not even a consideration for us. I didn't want to hear more, so I left. However, since then, we've been inundated with texts from them calling me rude and disgusting for dismissing Sharon's feelings. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole, and hand this back to your husband to deal with. He's done a great job of putting them back in their place throughout his life, and this is just one more time. Not the a-hole. He is weighing what he does now, but he thinks cutting all contact is likely the best way forward because they don't bring joy to us. I love your Marie Kondo approach to them, lol. My husband really had that stick with him when he heard it. He said it should apply to relationships too, because if relationships never bring you joy, then you know they aren't good for you. Update. Neighbor 40 female keeps showing up unannounced to my 24 male house. I recently moved into a new house in a small gated community over the summer. This is the first time I've lived in a house since I was little. When I moved in, I received a lot of welcome gifts from neighbors since it's a very tight-knit community. This is how I met most of my neighbors, including Dana and her husband. Dana is my next-door neighbor. The first time we met, Dana came to my front door with her husband and 3 sons to introduce themselves. They brought me homemade cookies as a welcome gift. Her sons were really into dirt bikes and saw mine in the garage while I was moving in. I told them they could come over and check them out anytime they wanted. I was just being nice. Dana never really said anything or gave off any red flags. The next week, I was at work and got a motion notification from one of my cameras. It was video of Dana by herself looking into a window on the side of my house. I thought maybe she was checking to see if I was home and didn't think much of it. Later that day, I got a text from her asking when I'd be home since her sons wanted to come over and check out my bikes. I replied that I'd be working late, and she responded that she'd let her sons know. Nothing else happened for a few weeks. The second event was on a Saturday night. She knocked on my front door and asked if I'd like to come over for dinner. I didn't really have much going on, so I said sure. I went over to her house, expecting her family to be there. Nope, it was just her. She said her family was visiting a relative. I didn't want to be rude, so I ended up staying. Dana is a big talker, so I barely got a word in that night. It felt strange, but it was just a conversation. A few days later, I saw her husband, Chris, while checking the mail. He asked me if I enjoyed Dana's cooking. I responded that it was great, and that I wished he could have been there. So I guess he knew about us having dinner and was fine with it. The third event happened a few days ago. My camera caught Dana walking in my backyard by herself, looking into the shed. I confronted her on the phone and said she was just looking for a shovel. I informed her that my tools were in the garage and made sure to let her know I could see everything on my cameras. She apologized for not asking me before coming over. Later that day, she sent me a picture of my boat in a driveway, asking if I could take her out on it. I left her on red. The latest event happened last night. I had my somewhat new girlfriend over at the house. We were grilling in the backyard, having a good time, when all of a sudden, Dana showed up with her boys and literally self-invited her family to dinner. It was extremely awkward for everyone. I tried telling them that I didn't have enough for everyone, but Dana claimed her family wasn't that hungry. Dana didn't leave until my girlfriend left. I'm extremely confused if Dana is into me or just has no social awareness. The only thing keeping me from straight up confronting her is that we are neighbors and have to live next to each other. Her husband has been nice and doesn't give off any strange vibes. What do I tell her to leave me alone? Do I need to wait for her to do something again? Please help. Now for the top advice before reading the update. She's a taker. She just pushes and pushes, trying to get as much attention and crap as possible. Tell her to buzz off. Well, she's the HOA president, unfortunately. This woman thinks she owns your house. I hate neighbors like this. Opie said she's the HOA president. He's so screwed. Oh no. I was leaning heavy for her being into him, and that may still be the case. But there is undoubtedly some power tripping at play knowing she's the HOA president. Considering HOAs can sometimes get things escalated to the point of evicting people from their own homes, I'd be the wariest person in the neighborhood if I were Opie. Get blinds for your windows and keep them shut. Motion sensor lights. No trespassing signs. Get a security system. Just call the cops. Going into your property looking for a shovel is just testing the waters. Give her an inch and she'll take a mile and your life will be misery. Better she hates you than steals from you. I have blinds on the house. In the video, it looks like she was trying to find a window that was open. When I first was moving in, I left my garage open and went to lunch. A box of my clothes, labeled clothes, was missing. At the time, I thought maybe I lost it in the moving process, but now I think she had something to do with it. Oh, holy smokes. Nightmare scenario. I asked 2 different neighbors about her and they both said Dana was an awesome neighbor to have. Now for the update 2 weeks later. I wasn't expecting the original post to blow up the way it did. I'd like to thank everyone for their advice. Turns out the people who said she was into me were right. Dana texted me last Thursday letting me know that her family was going out of town for the weekend. She said she would be lonely and wanted to know if I'd keep her company. She said something like she was grateful to have such a young and strong man in her life, referring to me. I'm 90% sure that means she's into me. I politely declined by telling her that I would be with my girlfriend. Friday night, I was chilling with my girlfriend at home, and Dana knocked on the door. I'm so thankful for my girlfriend because she let Dana have it. We didn't hear anything from Dana the entire weekend. I guess Dana is now mad because she issued an HOA violation for my trash cans being in the wrong place. She was taking pictures of my girlfriend's car parked on the street for whatever reason. Yesterday, I had a conversation with one of my neighbors who let me know that Dana and her husband are apparently in an open relationship because her husband is bi. Anyways, not really my problem and I'll just deal with them as my neighbors. Ever since my girlfriend had that talk with her, Dana hasn't been on my property. Thanks again for the help. I'd go to the HOA and threaten them with a sexual harassment suit if she keeps it up with the fines and pictures. Yes, but make sure you frame it to the HOA as they are enabling her harassment, they are a vehicle for her harassment, they are making you feel attacked and harassed for not sleeping with her. You plan to hold them liable for it. Don't let them tell you it's between you and her. Tell them that if they continue, you'll be sending them a certified letter with the same information so that you have it on record that you notified them of their role in harassing you. You might have to lawyer up because she will make your life miserable. Save those texts. Have someone testimony your side. Make sure your cameras also record audio and make a diary of things she is overreacting as an HOA. Things will escalate at some point, and you might have to order a protective distance from her and another appointed HOA to supervise her house. Remember to check those HOA rules, item by item. Neighbor sounds like a creep. She sounds like a total psycho. If she's already retaliating against Opie by reporting his trash cans to the HOA and taking pictures of his girlfriend's car, then I wonder how she's going to escalate things. Her being the president of their HOA really complicates things. Do what you can to protect yourself. Never be alone with her. She could make up false accusation against you. She definitely sounds like the type to do this too. Completely unhinged. Also desperate AF. Next story. My 40 female and my husband 41 male, together 6 years. He snooped on my phone and found something I did 16 years ago. Why is he mad? Backstory on my original post. For months, my husband has been suspicious that I'm cheating, even though I've never even messaged another man since before our first date. He snooped on my phone and found a message from 16 years ago. 10 years before we got together, where I was short on money and sent a mechanic some nudes in lieu of payment for supplying and fitting an alternator. He called me all sorts of names, and I got mad and told him I'd never trust him again and that I thought he was projecting. On to the update. Like many of you suggested, he was projecting. He's the one who's cheating. I left to stay with my sister for a few days after I wrote that post. While driving past the Premier Inn near her house, I saw his car outside. I waited by it for 3 hours and eventually he emerged with another woman. He said it was the first time that he thought we'd split up. She turned to him and said, "What are you talking about? Who is this?" referring to me. He literally ran off like a coward. I spoke to the woman, who turned out to be lovely. She said they'd been seeing each other for over a year, but he told me he was living with his religious parents after leaving his wife. That's why they could never go back to his house and always got hotels. She was such a kind young woman, and I ended up having to console her and even took her home myself. As for us, I'm back at home, and he is now staying at his parents' house. His parents were very disappointed in him when they heard the news and have been lovely to me. I've started divorce proceedings, but I imagine it'll take about a year to finalize. Take no prisoners, girl. Ask his lover to testify in your divorce proceedings on your behalf. We won't need to go to court, hopefully, if he just accepts the divorce. A person as controlling and manipulative as him is not going to just accept the divorce. He'll keep you dangling and hoping and use it to keep pulling you back in. Trust me, you don't want to have to depend on this guy's word about anything. It's completely up to you. But if you have decided you want to get divorced, then you should contact a lawyer. They give you a free consultation and greatly facilitate the process. If he's going to be cooperative about getting divorced like he says, then getting a lawyer will only make things smoother because you won't have to figure out which forms to fill out and file. Incredible that he told her he was staying with his parents, and now he is. Yep, it's like he willed it into happening. Lol. He manifested, and it happened. I was married to a serial cheater, and it may suck a bit now, but you are on your way to bigger and better things. That was very nice of you to console her. Please be sure to tend your own emotions as well. Gotta look out for number 1. To be honest, I was already 80% certain I was going to divorce him after the name calling and snooping, so this didn't devastate me as much as it would normally would. I really hope his mother and father know that he abandoned the girl he conned into a relationship at the motel, and that you were kind enough to take her home. What a man. I told him he abandoned a 23-year-old 30 miles from her home. Last story. My 37 female husband 39 male went to a work dinner with a woman and was gone 5 hours. Wasn't where he said he'd be and wouldn't respond to my calls and texts. I kicked him out and he says I'm overreacting. Can anyone help me make sense of what happened here? My husband of 6 years works in a field where sales reps are constantly vying to get him to use their products. One way they do this is by hosting dinners at upscale restaurants, think expensive steakhouses, and inviting groups to attend a presentation about their product in exchange for a free steak dinner. So far this year, my husband has attended upwards of 40 of these dinners. I find this a little excessive, especially considering we have a 3-year-old and a 5-month-old at home, and I rarely get a reciprocal night out. For context, we've been out together without the kids only 4 times in the past year. I've asked him to cut back on these dinners, but he refuses, saying he hopes to leverage these relationships into brand-sponsored speaking opportunities that could become a temporary source of secondary income. To his credit, this has happened before, and he made good money during his stint as a speaker. However, anytime I complain about the number of dinners he attends, he accuses me of not caring about our financial situation, or even outright trying to sabotage it. From my understanding, he attends far more of these dinners than most people in his field. Now on to the dinner in question. Last week, he forwarded me a screenshot of a text from a sales rep who said she would be in town for 2 nights and wanted to have dinner with just him while she was there. This is fairly unusual as most dinners are group affairs with friends and colleagues. On one other occasion, he met with a sales rep one-on-one, but it was an older man. This time, it was an attractive woman around our age. I looked her up on social media. They agreed to meet on Monday at 6:30 at a nice tapas restaurant in an expensive part of town because, according to my husband, it was close to her hotel. While this made sense, I raised an eyebrow at his phrasing. He got annoyed. But I pointed out that this was a dumb thing to say to your wife when you're meeting a woman for dinner at a nice restaurant. He left the house at 6:04. For context, I am extremely sleep deprived. I'm up with a new baby several times a night, and my husband has refused to participate in night feedings. By 9, I was exhausted and really wanted to sleep, but the baby was colicky and crying, and it was keeping my toddler awake. I texted my husband to ask when he thought he'd be home so I could have an idea how much longer I'd need to stay up. I said it was no big deal, just give me a ballpark estimate. He didn't respond. He wears an Apple Watch and is constantly responding to texts. So it was annoying that he couldn't give me an ETA after 3 hours at dinner. I called him at 9:15 and he sent me straight to voicemail. I called again at 9:30 with the same results. At this point, I texted him and said I was calling the restaurant. When I did, the host told me the restaurant was empty and confidently stated that no one matching my husband's description had been there that night. I texted him that I was calling his parents to see if they had heard from him. They hadn't. Finally, at almost 10, I texted him and told him not to come home. 15 minutes after my last text, he sent me an automated text from his GPS app saying he'd be home by 10:20. I texted him again and told him to go to his parents' house. He showed up anyway and I wouldn't let him in. He didn't have keys. He said I was acting crazy. He claimed the tapas restaurant was more like his sports bar, so they went to a nicer place across the street. He said his phone was in his pocket on silent, though he had to have declined calls to send me straight to voicemail. He said he was trying to generate revenue for our family. He told me my self-esteem wasn't his problem. He said my behavior had better be a symptom of PMDD. He accused me of creating events in my mind. Long story short, I didn't let him in. He slept at his parents' house and came by the next morning to get his stuff. He's staying with them again tonight after attending yet another dinner, and likely will be for the foreseeable future. I think his behavior was shady and disrespectful to me, but he thinks I've blown the whole thing out of proportion. I'm so tired that I can't make sense of it. I need to ask, am I justified in my anger, or is he right that I'm blowing this out of proportion? Thanks in advance. Now for the top comments. He said a lot of things, but he didn't seem to say, I'm sorry. That's because he's not sorry. Yep, my ex was hunting women on TikTok and LinkedIn. I got justification about his needs, then was mocked about being upset about it, instead of an apology. When they aren't sorry, they don't apologize. It's that simple. He's showing you who he is. We just have to come to terms with that reality versus the one we want. The best case scenario here is your husband just doesn't give a damn about you or your family. That's best case scenario. Worst is what's more likely that he's cheating. I'm a doctor and have been to these dinners. Your husband is the big fish here, not the rep. They're trying to impress him, not the other way around. There's absolutely no reason he can't step away and take your calls or end it early. And most importantly, no reason he can't say no to dinners in favor of being a father and husband. Also, on what planet does this 35-year-old rep hold the keys to him becoming a lucrative speaker? All of it is BS. Tell him if he's so concerned about financials, he should consider the cost of a divorce, alimony, and child support. The prank that made my friend's family move overnight, and he never knew it was me. Original post. Alright, so picture this. It's the mid-90s, I'm a middle schooler, and pranking my friends are practically a hobby. One Friday, I was hanging out with a couple of my buddies. Let's call them Derek, Jamie, and Sam. We were riding bikes after school. just goofing around when Derek suggested we make a quick stop by his place so he could feed a dog. I had read about a genius prank in Mad magazine, and suddenly I knew exactly what I wanted to try. The prank was classic. You lift the toilet tank lid, position the fill hose just right so it sprays water at the person who flushes it. Since the water doesn't fill the tank, the float bulb won't rise and the water keeps spraying until someone turns it off or fixes the hose. It was foolproof, or so I thought. As we got close to Derek's house, I put on my best desperate act. "Man, I really need to use the bathroom," I said, pretending to squirm. Derek told me no problem. He just needed to let the dog out and give it food and water. But then he said something that threw a wrench in my plans. To be honest, I need to go too. I panicked a bit. If he went before me, my prank was ruined. Luckily, he let me go first. I practically bolted upstairs, holding myself for dramatic effect, and Derek pointed me down the hall to the bathroom. Once inside, I lifted the toilet tank lid, positioned the hose just right, and closed it back up, picturing Derek's reaction as water would spray out. I went back downstairs, trying to look as casual as possible. A minute later, Derek ran up to use the bathroom, while the rest of us waited with our bikes outside. He came back down like nothing happened, so we hopped on our bikes and rode to the park. I tried fishing for any sign that he'd noticed the water, saying, "Man, you took long enough." He just shrugged, said he'd let the dog out and took a quick piss, and that was that. No mention of any water, no reaction at all. After a while, I forgot about it as we spent the day hanging out. Even got to chat with a girl I'd have a massive crush on. Life was good. Then came Monday. During class, I noticed Derek looked a bit out of it. After lunch, the PA system crackled, calling him to the office and announcing he'd be leaving for the day. He looked confused, grabbed his stuff and left. The whole class heard him grabbing things from his locker outside. But then he didn't come back the next day, or the day after that. In fact, he didn't come back at all. We all wondered what the hell had happened. Finally, Sam, who was pretty tight with Derek, broke the news. Derek had moved away, just like that. My heart dropped. Derek was one of my closest friends, and it didn't make any sense. Sam explained that Derek's parents had been out of town that weekend, leaving him to check on the dog. Apparently, when Derek had gone to the bathroom, he flushed without noticing anything, and the prank went into full effect. The water kept spraying out all day Friday, then all through Saturday and Sunday, flooding the entire bathroom, then the hallway, and eventually causing the ceiling to collapse into the living room, and water to completely flood out the main floor and basement. When Derek's parents came home on Monday, they found the aftermath of the disaster. They had no choice but to pick up and leave, as their house, which was already on the verge of being condemned, was now finished for sure. The house has been taken down. I felt my stomach drop and my face go pale as it all clicked together. My harmless prank had basically destroyed their entire house, and I was the reason he and his family had to pull plug and move away. He was a good friend to me. I never told anyone the truth, and I still feel a pang of guilt every time I think about it. I never saw Derek again. Now for the top comments before reading the mini update. So how come Derek didn't notice the carnage at any point during the weekend? Didn't he go home after hanging out? Where was he staying? How did the dog manage with only being let out once in 72 hours? I'm very baffled. He was actually staying with his grandma that weekend and would only swing by to feed a dog, who had a little setup out in the backyard. The dog food was kept in the back entrance, so we never even went fully inside the main house after that first day. I've thought about this so many times, and the details still blow my mind. But yeah, the house was definitely destroyed by the time his parents got home. This is the greatest use of this sub I have ever seen. It's a real sliding doors moment you caused for someone else. Could you track him down? Find out how his life played out. Maybe it was better off. I've definitely thought about reaching out, but honestly, the anxiety always kicks in hard. I can't shake the feeling that his life probably didn't improve after that incident. His family didn't have a lot of money, and looking back, it was a pretty big mistake on my part. The thought of trying to reconnect and potentially reopening old wounds is a tough one to wrestle with. Still, a part of me wonders where life took him after all that. Man, I know you feel guilty already, but holy crap, this is really bad. Yeah, it's so bad, right? Like, as an adult now, I can see how truly devastating that prank was. He ruined people's lives. Financially ruining a family over a prank. Yeah, I don't know if I would be able to look at anyone in the face again after learning what happened. The intention was never to actually financially ruin anybody, but to harmlessly spray water at one of my friends. Definitely not something I ever thought would happen. Mini update. Honestly, the reactions to this have been not that surprising, and not in a good way. People are saying I deserve terrible karma or even worse, blaming me for supposedly ruining an entire family. Some even go as far as to suggest my prank could have caused someone to spiral into addiction or something even darker. It's wild to see this level of anger over something I did as a 6th grader, when I was just a dumb, immature kid trying to pull a prank. A lot of people are saying I should reach out and apologize, but the truth is, I don't even have social media like Facebook or Instagram to try and track him down. And I want to be clear, this was never meant to harm anyone. It was just a prank I'd read about, and I didn't think through the consequences. Now looking back, I realize how serious it turned out to be, and it's something I've regretted for years. The hate and accusations I'm seeing here make it sound like I set out with some evil plan to destroy a family, which is just insane. I was a kid. I messed up, and I'm genuinely sorry for the damage it caused. But at this point, all I can do is acknowledge my mistake and try to move on, even if some people think that's not enough. And to Derek, if by some crazy chance you're reading this, I just want to say I'm sorry. We were young and dumb, as I'm sure you remember. From shooting each other with BB guns to jousting with sticks on our bikes, to launching Roman candles and bottle rockets at each other, we did some pretty crazy stuff. But this prank went too far, and I genuinely regret the mess it caused. I never meant for it to be more than a harmless joke, but it ended up way bigger than I could have imagined. I'm truly sorry for how it all turned out, and I hope life has been kind to you since. Next story. Am I the a-hole for not giving my late husband's mom any of the life insurance money after she paid for his funeral? My husband and I were both in our early 40s, married for 6 years, when he passed away suddenly a few months ago. It's been the hardest thing I've ever faced, and honestly, I've just been trying to survive each day since. Right after he died, his mom, my mother-in-law, stepped in and insisted on paying for all the funeral expenses. I was completely out of it, just in a fog, and really grateful for the help. Here's the thing, I totally forgot that my husband had a small life insurance policy through my job. I only remembered it recently and filed a claim, getting a payout. It's not a huge amount of money, but enough to help me move back across the country to be with my family and maybe put something down on a modest home so I can start over. When my mother-in-law found out about the insurance payout, she flipped out. She's demanding I pay her back for the funeral costs and accusing me of using her son. She said some really hurtful things, calling me selfish and implying I'm somehow profiting off his death. But she offered to pay for the funeral, and I truly didn't know about the insurance money at the time. I'm still so broken over losing him, and the thought of being cold heartless just adds to the pain. I know she's grieving too, but I'm trying to do what's best for me to heal and move forward. So, am I the a-hole if I don't give her the money? I'm already barely holding it together and just need a chance to rebuild my life. I'm ready, I hope, to handle the criticism that may be coming my way. Everyone sucks here. When you found out that you were going to be getting a payout from the insurance company, in my opinion, you should have let her know and offered to pay her back for the funeral expenses. Whether she chose to accept it or not is up to her, but I think the right thing would be to at least offer, even if some time had passed by that point. Sounds to me though like she said some pretty cruel stuff. Seems like she crossed the line. On the plus side, you probably won't have to talk to her ever again anyways. Fair point. In just a few comments I've seen so far, you all have made points that I feel I would normally think of / work through, but my brain is just not there yet. Flight or fight mode, I think. Also think of the fact she lost her son. No one is in the best headspace. Seems fair to just give her half of the funeral expenses if you can, then cut all contact with her since you have no children. She crossed a line with her insults that can never be fixed or retracted. In other words, she showed her true nature. Don't forget mother-in-law is grieving too. I am child-free, so we'll never know what it is like to lose a child. But even losing an adult child must be a horrific experience. Mother-in-law stepped up to deal with the funeral expenses when OP was too out of it to deal with this aspect of her husband's death. The name-calling is vile, but mother-in-law is hurting too. And I can see how she feels used now that she finds out OP got a pretty decent sum in insurance. You're the a-hole, to be honest. You should at least give her some of the money. Both of you are grieving, and it's common for people who are grieving to be a bit, not selfish, but self-centered as a way to protect themselves. I don't think you are a selfish person, but you are only thinking about yourself, which is understandable in a crisis. Here's the thing, funerals are not cheap, and his mother had to pay for the funeral and was supporting you. The least you can do is reimburse her. I am genuinely sorry for both of your losses, and I hope that the relationship was not damaged by this misstep, as you both will need each other. It's okay if you need to tell her that you needed to hear from some peers to realize the mistake. Thank you. I appreciate your honesty. Last story. Am I the a-hole for telling my dad he chose between me and his fiance when he prioritized her surgery over mine? I, 17 female, have had a rocky relationship with my dad. My parents married after I was born, hoping to provide a stable family for me, but they divorced when I was 11 after my dad went to rehab, and things only worsened from there. During rehab, he met his current fiance and they later had a kid, 6 female. Since then, my dad has been mostly absent from my life. Whenever I have important events, he either has an excuse or doesn't show. I'd estimate he's been present for less than half my events since their divorce. A few years ago, I was diagnosed with scoliosis, and initially surgery wasn't needed. However, my condition got worse, and I was finally scheduled for surgery on September 20 of this year. I told my dad about it months ago, expressing how much I needed his support this time, and he promised to be there. But later, he texted to say he'd planned a vacation that would keep him away until mid-December, just as my recovery period would be ending. It broke my heart, but I accepted it. Then, 2 hurricanes hit his vacation spot, and he told me he'd make my surgery. I felt a glimmer of hope, but then just a week before my surgery, he texted again saying his fiance's lung cancer surgery had been scheduled for the same day, a few hours before mine, at a hospital 30 minutes away. He said he might not make it to my surgery. But with him, might not usually means won't. He added that this wasn't about who he loved more. That message shattered me. I realized that no matter how much I hoped, he might never give me the attention and support I needed. I broke down in my kitchen floor that day. After sitting with my feelings, I texted him to tell him how deeply his actions hurt me. I said it wasn't only about love, but about showing care, and that he'd given me hope only to let me down again. I questioned if his fiance's surgery had really been scheduled last minute, or if he had known earlier but hadn't told me. I asked him to show he was my dad through his actions, not just his words. He responded, insisting the surgery was only scheduled the day he'd told me. But because he's lied in the past to save face, I reached out to someone who might know the truth. I then sent a follow-up message, clarifying that my frustration wasn't with his fiancé. It was with his ongoing absence and lack of support. I said that even if his reasons were genuine, he could have at least shown some empathy. I told him I'd hoped he'd be a better father for my half-sister than he has been for me. In a final message, I made it clear that I was done putting in all the effort to maintain our relationship on my own. I told him that if he wanted to be my dad, I would gladly be his daughter, but if he chose not to, I would be fine with that too. He hasn't responded, and honestly, I'd prefer he sit with what I've said. For once, I hope he really thinks about his actions and the impact they've had on me. So, am I the a-hole? Girl, your father hasn't shown up for you your entire life. What makes you think he is going to do it now? And furthermore, why do you allow him to have that power over you? He is not your father. He is the male who impregnated your mother. Stop elevating him to father status. This man is going to support the person he is making his life with, not the child he walked away from years ago. He doesn't prioritize you, and he never will, no matter what words he uses or promises he makes. Good luck with your surgery and focus on your recovery. Thank you, I will. Lung cancer surgery for fiance trumps daughter who still has mom's scoliosis surgery. But otherwise, from what you've said about his reliability, not a-hole. Maybe send fiance a note wishing her luck. And if it was a lie, crap will hit the fan. No way. If I had to choose between my daughter and husband, I would 100% choose my daughter. Why? 1. My husband is an adult. 2. Me being at the hospital while he had surgery would not change the outcome of the surgery, so the severity does not matter. 3. Both surgeries could go wrong. If I had to choose whose smile I would see for the last time, it's my daughter's. 4. I love my husband very much. He is the love of my life. But it cannot be compared to how I feel about my daughter. Would I sacrifice my own life to save my husband? I don't know. Would I sacrifice my own life to save my daughter's life? Yes, without any doubt. Just let me know where to sign and it's done.